What is Indigenous law?
Good question. First, here's what we are not talking about. We are not talking about the body of laws that stem from state laws that apply to and impact Indigenous people. Like 1. Constitutional Aboriginal and treaty rights cases. So hunting, fishing, land, as these are often cases brought after Indigenous individuals are charged with regulatory offenses for exercising their Aboriginal and treaty rights. 2. Indian Act or on-reserve legal issues created by the Indian Act and related to legislation. These can be issues like membership, housing, wills and estates, election disputes. 3. Gladue sentencing principles in criminal law. Gladue are sentencing principles that say the unique circumstances of Indigenous offenders must be taken into account by the judge and any other option besides jail should be considered. And 4. Or even international legal instruments like the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, UNDRIP for short. Sometimes we call this body of law Aboriginal law to distinguish them from Indigenous law as a subject area. Of course, as Estella Charlson discusses, there are points of overlap, but for our purposes, we want to be clear that when we talk about Indigenous law, we are talking about Indigenous people's own laws. Indigenous and non-Indigenous societies all have laws, principles, and processes for ensuring community and individual safety, solving problems and resolving disputes, coordinating relations in society, managing resources, fairness and accountability, public and legitimate decision-making. Indigenous laws are not just in the past, just restorative justice, just tradition, customs, or protocols. Indigenous laws may be written or unwritten, may be ancient, deeply rooted, sourced in the sacred or the earth, may be recent, drafted as treaty, agreements, bylaws, legislation, or constitutions, may have elements of both Indigenous legal traditions and other sources of law, like state law, international instruments, etc. Basically, there's a rich diversity of Indigenous laws, but what they all have in common is that they are laws that are rooted in Indigenous communities and developed by Indigenous peoples.